Look at that. I made that on a camp stove. Love that. Hi, I'm Allie Slagle. I am at my weekend house and I am making my mom's world famous chili. By weekend house, I mean also my car. My boyfriend converted an old Japanese van so that we can sleep and cook in it and drive across the country. So a month ago we started in New York and we're now on the Oregon coast, specifically the Tillamook State Forest. And it's raining because we're in Oregon. So I am making my mom's very famous chili. And by very famous, I mean it will probably be on her gravestone, this chili recipe. I should say that this is not real chili. This is chili that scratches the itch of chili, but you're not simmering it for many hours. You're not toasting dried chilies. There's definitely a place for that. But this chili is something that my mom came up with just from what she had in her house that she can pull together at any moment. So it really does come from jars and cans and just 2 fresh things. I'm gonna show you how to make it. You only have to chop 2 things, onion and cilantro. We chopped our 1 thing. Now I'm gonna start cooking. So just a little oil. There's a recipe for this chili on Food 52. It's called Sherry's Shortcut Chili. And it's a recipe I published many years ago. And then when I started working on my cookbook, I knew I had to include this recipe, and my mom and I both made the recipe on Food 52, and we were like, it's good, but it's not quite how it tastes when my mom makes it. So we spent a year and a half separately and together remaking the recipe to try and get all the measurements right. And what I'm gonna make for you now is as close as we were able to get it, but you know, things aren't always as good as when your mom makes it for you. This camping stove is the hottest stove I have ever cooked on. It boils water in like a minute. So this chili is gonna go even faster. Okay, onions go in along with a lot of cumin. And they bloom and toast together. This is a spoonula, which my cookbook editor gave me because she knows I love efficient tools. It is a spoon and a spatula, and it is my most used tool in this van. I was very selective about what tools I would put in this van because there's only so much space, and this tool was kind of a risk because I hadn't used it before she gave it to me, and I'm really glad I brought it. I can't remember what I say about how done the onions should be, but obviously the longer you cook them, the sweeter they'll be, but you definitely just want them at least soft, but you can take them to brown if you want. Here's what mine look like with the cumin. It smells really good. I think we're gonna go on to the next step. We're now gonna add our meat. So this was a very contentious step when I worked on this recipe with my mom. She puts the onions and the meat together and sautés it all, but I was kind of insistent that you can't get either part really browned because there's so much stuff in the pot. So we compromised. So I brown the onions first and then I add the ground meat after, but I just push the onions to the side instead of taking them out of the pot. So the meat goes in. That's not a good way to do that. And I'm using ground turkey, but you could use turkey or chicken or even beef. So I'm gonna season this meat. With salt. I would add pepper if I had it, but I don't know where it is right now. And then You want to just leave the block of meat undisturbed and let it brown. If the pan looks dry, just add more oil. So what's happening here for optimal browning is the onions are pushed to the side and then the whole block of meat is just sitting right there. So you're gonna get one side really browned, but the chicken's not gonna dry out because it's not all touching the surface of the pot. All right, so this meat is really nicely browned on the bottom. And I like too that the onions that are on the surface also got even more browned. So now I'm just gonna break up the meat into big pieces. And I'm gonna stir it into the onions. I'm now gonna add two of the most important ingredients to this recipe. One is ketchup, and you're probably like, why is there ketchup in this chili? But my mom and I talked about this a lot, like why doesn't she use tomato paste? And she finds that the sweetness and the consistency of the ketchup really offsets all of the chili and the heat that's gonna come. Long squirt of ketchup. And then hot sauce. This is where some of the chili pep will come, but there will also be some from the salsa. Add a little bit now, and then you can always balance later with more. So you kind of just want to stir the ketchup and hot sauce into the onions and meat and let some of their liquid evaporate. You're kind of blooming the ketchup, if you will, and blooming the hot sauce. See? Yum, right? Okay. So now we're gonna add like the liquid of the chili. First is tomato puree, and I'm using just a half of this jar because I'm making just a half batch because tiny space, tiny pot, but the recipe is written for a whole jar of tomato puree because my mom and I both hate like little bits of ingredients sitting around. And then we're adding a whole jar, but I'm just gonna use half, a whole jar of salsa. And this is also where you're kind of gonna get those chili flavors coming through. My mom really likes medium. We tried all different spicinesses of salsa and we found medium was the best balance with the tomato and the ketchup, the sweetness from the tomato and the ketchup. So we've added the tomato puree and the salsa, and now we just let it simmer. The question of how long to simmer is a good one. My mom says you just need about 5 minutes, but I've also seen her just leave the pot slowly bubbling on the stove while she goes and does other things. I think just keep tasting it, and whenever it tastes good to you, then it's done. If it gets too thick, just add some more water. If it's too sweet, add more hot sauce. If it's too spicy, add more ketchup. If it doesn't taste like much, add some salt. So once it's done simmering, we add just two more things. One is beans, just enough to heat them through, and cilantro. I think cilantro is really important to this chili because it adds freshness, and I like when the cilantro kind of actually hits the heat and kind of mellows. I think my mom puts like half a cup of chopped cilantro, so it's not just a garnish, like it actually is an important part of the recipe. I have a secret, which is that I accidentally bought tomato puree with basil, so this doesn't really smell like chili just yet. But I hope that basil taste will dissipate. So this stove is on like a 3-piece cabinet system. Part down here, I don't know if you can see it, it's a little drawer with tools, and it glides into this other part, and when this stove is down and shut, it glides into this part, which is my cutting area, and then the whole thing goes into this cabinet system, which is under our bed, which is also our couch. How cool is that? So I'm gonna add the beans. Generally, I would drain them and rinse them, but that is kind of a production in this van. So I'm just gonna add the beans with the liquid. It will be fine. It'll add some starchiness to the liquid, but because there's so many other flavors going on in the chili, we won't really taste the bean liquid. And then cilantro. One thing I've learned in the month that I've been cooking out of this van is that so many things that my mom made for me growing up are really well suited to this small space with limited resources, not a lot of fridge space, stuff like that. And I think that just goes to how efficient she is as a cook, and how grateful I am that she came up with recipes like this. I made this with stuff from the local grocery store. I chopped 2 things, I simmered for some time, and now I get to eat this wonderful thing in this beautiful place. And I'm grateful for her for coming up with that. Look at that. I made that on a camp stove. Love that. I think because the chili uses salsa, you actually get bites of peppers and different ingredients, but you didn't really have to procure those ingredients. The ketchup really does give the chili like this body that you would have to simmer for a long time to get. And the hot sauce is like this great calibration with the sweet. The cilantro adds freshness. I just love it. I have eaten this on its own with some tortillas. I love it with scrambled eggs for breakfast. It is the morning right now, so I might have to make some eggs to go with it. But I hope you like this chili and it enters your life in some way. Thanks so much for watching. If you want to see something else made from a van, let us know in the comments. I'm gonna go eat chili now.